it sounds cliche, but not giving up. Certainly, with veterinary medicine, it is very competitive, and I think it's less competitive now. Thankfully, there are more vet schools open than when I applied. I think there were only 7 vet schools when I applied.
Hello and welcome back to Future You, the podcast brought to you by graduate careers experts Prospects. I'm your host, Emily Slade, and in this episode, we discuss what it's like being a vet.
So my name's Alex Crowe. I'm a small animal veterinarian and been working in Nottingham in the UK for the last sort of 5 or 6 years, and I now work for an online vet telemedicine company.
Perfect. So, did you go to university?
I did indeed, yeah. So I went to the Royal Veterinary College. They're based in London. Went there for 5 years and graduated in 2019.
Okie doke. So, can you just sort of go to the veterinary college? You don't have to have anything ahead of that?
No, unfortunately, you need to have quite a lot ahead of it. So I wish it was that easy. No, it was a case of obviously going through school, GCSEs, A levels, getting certain grades at A levels, and I can go into detail sort of, what grades vet schools look for. And then it's a case of applying for vet schools really, which involves sort of submitting a CV, interviews, often going and having practical tests and assessments as well. And then it's hopefully you get accepted and then you're at vet school.
Mm-hmm. So, do you have to choose specific options at sort of A level and GCSE?
Generally, yes. Yeah. So the vet schools, there's a little bit of leeway, but for the most part, they like the sciences and maths. So I think maths, chemistry, biology are kind of the core topic subjects that they like to look for. I think they don't mind physics as well. So you can kind of substitute, biology for physics. But I think as long as you've got what 3 of those 4, then they like that for getting into vet school.
Okay. If you were to go and do a degree somewhere else at a university and then decide to almost convert to vet school, is that an option as long as you've, again, sort of studied something within the remit of maths, science, that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I don't even think it has to be necessarily that closely related to veterinary either, to be honest. I mean, I think the science-based, prior degrees obviously give you probably a bit of an advantage. But yeah, there are conversion courses and it depends on the university. Obviously, I didn't go down this route, but I know that the Royal Veterinary College, I think Nottingham, I think Edinburgh, they have 4-year versions of veterinary medicine, which is basically an accelerated course. But to get onto those, you have to have done a prior degree. So, zoology is a common one, biochemistry, those kind of courses will then allow you to go onto that 4-year accelerated course to become a vet.
Oh, wonderful. So, what made you want to become a vet?
God, big question. Obviously, the love of animals, that's the common, probably most predictable, boring answer. But that's absolutely true. I grew up with animals all my life. I had cats growing up for the most part, but always, was very fond of dogs as well and just pets in general, and certainly preferred them to humans for the most part. Had a bit of an affinity with animals. But then, as I suppose, I went through school and did more complex subjects and whatnot and enjoyed learning at school. I liked the challenge of being a vet. So that's probably the main reason I like being a vet, is that it is a challenge. And comparing it to human medicine, obviously human medicine is very difficult as well. But the difference is that animals can't tell you what's wrong. They can't tell you where it hurts. They can't tell you how they're feeling. So there's a little bit more of an added challenge there in that, you need to try and work out what's going wrong without having that verbal kind of connection with the patient, I suppose. So, it's a very kind of broken down process of, what potential conditions could it be and what tests do we want to do. Yeah, it's just the nice challenge of that, I think, is what mainly drew me to it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I never considered that before. Of course, they can't tell you what's wrong with them.
No, unfortunately not. Unless you're Dr. Dolittle, but no, that would help.
Amazing. So it was sort of something you always had in the back of your mind as something you wanted to pursue.
Yeah, I think so. Certainly something medical related. I never excelled that much at school, to be honest. I was, an underachiever probably up until GCSEs. And then I got decent GCSEs and it kind of hit home that, okay, if I really knuckle down and, put some work into it, I can probably get some good A levels and I can become a vet or a doctor. I was kind of flicking back and forth between those two and then decided on a vet, once I was doing my A levels. So yeah, it was always a dream, I suppose, but I never really took it seriously until end of GCSEs, A levels.
Yeah. How did you get your current job?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, it's a funny one. So Basically, I have a mutual friend that's a vet who went to the same university. He's a couple of years above me, and he was the vet for another chap who is basically the founder or one of the founders of the current sort of startup online vet company that I work for. So he reached out to that vet. He was called Rory, and then Rory was too busy to take that job, so he basically referred me to them and started that conversation. And I really like the idea of doing something a little bit different within the veterinary world.
Yeah, so can you just explain how your job works? As you say, it's not the standard. You're not necessarily always in a practice with people visiting you with their appointments. How does your job work?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all online based. So it's a telemedicine service. It's called the NetVet, and it's essentially an app that owners can download and contact vets by text, by video call, and they pay a monthly subscription to that. And it's essentially the goal is just to make veterinary care, veterinary advice really accessible, trying to lower those boundaries, specifically sort of cost boundaries that stop a lot of people going to the vet. So my day to day with that is obviously answering questions on the app. So any queries that clients have, I'm on the app, I'm doing video calls, I'm talking to them over text, helping them that way. But then a bit different to a normal vet, I suppose, I'm having quite a lot of involvement with the businessy side of the startup, which is, the marketing and the partnership side of things, and making sure we're on the right side of the RCVS, who are the governing body for vets in the UK. So it's very varied. It's very different being, your standard normal in practice vet, certainly. And I think that variety is what keeps it really interesting for me. I do the odd day as well in clinic as what we call a locum vet, pick up a few shifts to do the practical in-person stuff, just because I think it's important to keep your foot dipped in with that as well.
Yeah, 100%. I was also going to ask, do you miss the physical, tangible, someone brings their kitten in and you get to cuddle it? I guess you can't do that if you're going through an app.
Not so much. No, I mean, unfortunately, being a vet isn't all just cuddling kittens, but it's a fair chunk of it. I give you that. But yeah, I do miss it at times, absolutely. But I think doing a few days a month is more than enough to sort of satisfy that itch from my point of view, because it's very stressful in clinic. You have long days, you're working back to back, often fully booked with consultations. So it is quite stressful. So I think doing 3 or 4 days a month is more than enough to do a bit of surgery, do a bit of practical stuff, talk to clients face to face, and I kind of satisfy that side of things. And then I think after doing a day of that, I'm probably ready to just work from home again. And not that it's any more relaxed at home, certainly, but it's not quite as intense, I suppose.
Yeah, of course. How do you manage stressful or emergency situations?
Sort of as an in-person vet or
Yeah.
to
Well,
the online vet?
both really. How do you navigate your own, I don't think I could do it. I don't think somebody could bring me their sickly puppy,
Yeah.
and then I had to cut them open. I don't. How do you manage that?
Yeah. I suppose, part of it is obviously you have to be interested in it, and you have to kind of know that you're the right sort of person for doing that. Not everyone's cut out for it, absolutely. Just like I'm not cut out for, sitting in an office doing banking, but some people are cut out for that. But I think it's trying to separate yourself as much as possible. I think it's obviously important to have an emotional side and be empathetic with owners and their situation, etc. But at the end of the day, you want what's best for the animal. And I think stepping back and thinking of it, as the biology, as the physiology, what's going on within that animal's body, why it's feeling these symptoms, what could be wrong. I think trying to get that perspective rather than getting bogged down in kind of the emotions of it is really important for sure. Because it allows you to just think straight and kind of take a bit of a systematic approach to get to the bottom of what's going wrong.
Yeah. In terms of things that go wrong, how do you stay up to date with advances in veterinary medicine? Does it
Yeah,
change often?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's always, new studies, new literature coming out. So as vets, we have to meet what are called CPD requirements. So that's continued professional development. So we have to do, I think, about 26 hours of that a year, which doesn't sound like a massive amount. And that can be made up of in-person kind of practical days. So you might go pay for a course, might be a surgery course, it might be a dentistry course, whatever you're interested in, or areas where you feel like you're lacking, there's always loads of options for improving skills that way. But there's lots of online webinars as well, and seminars and things like that. So there's loads of ways that you can get that extra information, keep yourself up to date. And obviously, just the curiosity of the job, anyway, hopefully will, lead you to wanting to seek that information out. And like I say, that is a strict kind of rule that the RCVS, again, the governing body of vets in the UK, have in place. They say that vets have to meet these 26 hours every year to make sure that they're up to date. That's the whole idea of it.
Yeah. What are the biggest challenges that you face in your job?
Yeah, I think definitely the emotion side of it, touching on that again. You'll have a lot of situations where owners, maybe they can't afford treatment or, just something horrendous has happened to their animal. And, sometimes it isn't something that you can treat. And I think dealing with that yourself can be really difficult, but also then conveying that to the owner, in an empathetic way without obviously shattering the whole world. It's then obviously be extremely upsetting for them, but trying to do that in the right way can be very difficult sometimes. You have to get the facts across about whatever the situation might be, but then show that emotional side, and striking that balance can be quite difficult at times, definitely. So yeah, and I think just the general stress and like that emotional load of the job, it's a cumulative thing. If you're facing a lot of difficult situations over the course of a day or a week, it really does bog you down and it can get on top of you. So it's really important to just be aware of, your internal state, I suppose, and make sure you keep that balance.
Hmm. You mentioned at the beginning that am I right, you're a small animals
Yes.
specifically. So does that mean that you are primarily focused on, is there a sort of spectrum of size that you go up to and then another vet will take over if, for example, a horse comes in?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just horses just don't come in. We just say no to horses, basically, because I don't know much about horses. So the way that vets are taught at uni is they're taught everything. So you're taught your small animals. So that includes cats, dogs, rabbits, guinea pigs, gerbils, ferrets. Your exotics, if you like. Parrots, birds would fit under that as well, and reptiles. Although exotics is slightly separate to small animals, I suppose. But then you've got your equine, which is its own separate discipline, and then you've got farm vets, which is obviously your cows, your sheep, your goats, your alpacas, whatever it might be. And you can have mixed vets. So when you taught all of that at uni, but generally you'll gravitate towards one or potentially a mix of two. And if it's a mix, it's usually, small animal and farm, or potentially equine farm. And it depends on the individual practice as well. So a lot of rural vet practices, say in, the Peak District or Yorkshire, often there aren't that many vets around. So they have to cover the small animals, they have to cover the equine, they have to cover the farm. They might do it all. And, if you're a vet working there, then you're exposed to all of these things. But I'd probably say the vast majority of vets are small animal vets. So they just deal with your cats, your dogs, your rabbits, sort of domestic creatures, things that would fit inside your house.
So on the flip side of the challenges, what's the best day you've ever had as a vet?
Gosh, the best day. Um, I think just when you feel appreciated as a vet is the big thing. It's not, we don't do it for that reason, but it's always nice when an owner brings in, a box of chocolates or a card, just to say thank you, and that extra effort has been recognized and appreciated. But then also working as part of a team, is a massive one, whether it is the physical vet stuff, working with nurses, as most vets do, part of a big team and working together to, help animals ultimately. But also, with my online stuff as well, working as part of a team with, the founders of the app, and sort of learning from them in different disciplines and batting ideas back and forth. So I think that people aspect of it is really important being a vet.
Definitely. So as a vet, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
That I've ever received.
Mhm.
For being a vet, do you
Mhm.
mean?
Yes.
Oh, that's a really good question. Let me have a think. Best piece of advice I've ever received. I think it's accepting that you don't always have the answers there and then. So I think especially as a new graduate vet, you've been to uni, you've learned all of this information, you've just got so much in your brain, you've done your exams, it's all quite fresh. And then you start work as a vet, you have these complicated kind of cases and problems come in, and you really think that, God, I should know exactly what the issue is here. I should know, what these symptoms mean, what this animal needs in terms of treatment, how to fix this animal. And I think actually that's not the case, and that's often the wrong approach. I think accepting, and this is certainly things that older vets have told me when I was a new grad, you don't always have to have the answers there and then. You can gather the information. It's absolutely fine to look things up or take a minute to go and ask a colleague perhaps, because you do get those weird and wonderful cases that are really, complicated, and you're not expected to know all the answers there and then. So I think just giving yourself a bit of a break really as a vet, and not being too burdened by having to know exactly what the issue is probably the best advice I've received.
Yeah. As a pet owner yourself, are you also the vet for your own dog?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's a funny one because you often can't really think rationally when it's your own pet.
Yeah.
There's often times, so I've got a 2-year-old Labrador called Maggie, and if thankfully she's pretty bulletproof, but there's been a couple of times when she's been a little bit ill, and definitely you kind of second guess yourself. You kind of think, if this was anyone else's pet, I'd know exactly what to do, but it's mine. I want to get a second opinion. So I'd often ask, my colleagues, like very basic, simple questions that I do know the answer to, but it's just when it's your own pet, obviously, you just get a bit paranoid and the emotions get involved. But yeah, absolutely, I'm her vet. I spayed her, so I had her under anaesthetic and I spayed her myself, which was, yeah, it was interesting. It was quite tense, quite nerve-wracking, certainly, but obviously all went fine, thankfully. But, a lot of vets won't want to do that. They just will not trust their own judgment on their own animals, so they'll completely outsource it.
Is it a common thing that a vet will more likely than not have a pet themselves?
I think so, yeah. I mean, we're all animal lovers at the end of the day. So working in a vet practice, you get loads of strays come in, and there's always the opportunity to adopt animals, probably too much opportunity, to be honest. So vets are probably the ones that have got zoos at home and, cats, dogs, and everything else in between. So yeah, absolutely. It's probably quite strange that you see a vet that doesn't have a
Yeah.
pet.
Yeah, I almost wouldn't trust one. So what advice do you have for anyone looking to enter the industry?
I think, it sounds cliche, but not giving up, certainly. With veterinary medicine, it is very competitive, and I think it's less competitive now, thankfully. There are more vet schools open than when I applied. I think there were only 7 vet schools when I applied, and I think the acceptance rate was about 9%. So, a tiny proportion of people that applied, students that applied, would actually get into vet school. And I had to reapply, so I didn't get in the first year. I had to take a gap year, unplanned as such. It was one of the best things that happened to me in the end. Really glad it happened, but I had to take a year out. I went traveling a bit, but also, really studied, really knuckled down, really prepared for interviews the second time round, and got in the second time I applied. So I think, not giving up that hope. If you don't get in the first year, that's quite normal actually. Up to sort of 40-50% of vet students often don't get in the first year. So try again, and obviously just be as prepared as possible.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. You're sort of available on Instagram.
Absolutely. So I'm personally on Instagram as Alex_the vet. So I do quite a lot of content, social media, educational, informative videos on there. But then also you can find the Net Vet on Instagram as well. And again, do a lot of content on there. And especially for aspiring vets, it's quite interesting to see a different side of veterinary, that you don't have to necessarily go down the traditional route of working in clinic. You can be an online vet, you can go into business and sort of startup side of things. So, it doesn't, confine you to being the traditional vet, if you like.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time
But yeah,
today.
no worries. Thanks so much, Emily. Nice to meet you.
Thanks again to Alex for their time. Head to prospects.ac.uk for more information on becoming a vet. All the links are in the show notes below. If you enjoyed the episode, feel free to leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. Thank you, as always, for listening, and good luck on your journey to future you.